Hi there, my name is Bandy and this is my channel, Bandy's Books. Today is Tuesday, so we're back with another book-related recipe. Today we're going to be celebrating Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. This book features a character named Kaya who is living in the marsh. Part of the time she's living with a family, but a lot of times she's on her own and she has to be pretty resourceful to survive. As such, food becomes kind of a central point of the story because she deals with a lot of food insecurity. So the times that she gets really fulfilling meals really stand out. And one of the things that really becomes a poignant treat to her is Blackberry Cobbler. At one point in the story, after her mother leaves, her and her father go out to eat. And they have Blackberry Cobbler at the end of their meal. The Blackberry Cobbler becomes like a fond memory for her, and it kind of is almost like this hopeful note of things maybe getting better in her life. You kind of have to read the story to see where it goes from there. But I thought I would do my own twist today on Blackberry Cobbler. It's a pretty easy dessert to whip together. There is some debate, I will say, about what makes a proper cobbler depending on what part of the country you're in or in the world. Where I'm from, we tend to do like kind of a thinner layer on top of fresh fruits, but in some places they do thicker, cakier biscuit type dough. It's kind of a regional variation. This is my own personal version, so if you do yours differently, that's totally okay. I'm all for variations. I like every type of cobbler there is. This, again, it's just how I personally do it at home. So this is a real easy dessert to make. It's relatively healthy for a dessert as well. And I'm even going to give you tips on how to make it gluten-free if you're going to make it for somebody that has a gluten sensitivity. And if you need something quick and easy that tastes really nice for the end of your Thanksgiving or Christmas meal, this is a great option. It looks good, it tastes good, it smells great while it's baking, and it just takes a few minutes to put together. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So to complete this recipe, you just need a couple of things. You're going to need 2 mixing bowls. One's going to be for the filling, one's going to be for the topping. You're going to need a microplane to grate some zest and some ginger. And I'm using a cast iron skillet, but you could also use a baking pan. I just happen to have my cast iron, so I thought I would use that. For ingredients, we're going to be using some butter, cinnamon, an orange, some raw sugar, salt, powdered sugar, baking powder, blackberries, flour, or if you're making a gluten-free version, you're going to substitute almond flour for the flour, cornstarch, and heavy whipping cream. Oh, and ginger. Go ahead and start by making our filling. I like to do this part first just because I like to let the berries macerate a little bit in the sugar. And then also with the dough for the top, you want the butter to be nice and cold. So I'm actually going to pop this back in the refrigerator while I'm making the middle or the filling part of it, the fruit. Alright, so we're going to start with our blackberries. You can see we got some nice beautiful blackberries here, good size. I'm just like to check them to make sure there's no leaves or anything stuck, or sometimes there's mold on blackberries, so we can throw them in here. If you are unable to get fresh blackberries, frozen blackberries actually work really well for this. That's not a problem to use those at all. Make sure you check your fruit well. Sometimes, like I said, there's little leaves and things in there. So these all look pretty good. We're going to give them a quick rinse. Okay, our berries are nice and rinsed off. So we're going to go ahead and take our orange and peel our sticker off here. We're just going to grate some orange zest into our berries. Find that the orange really works to bring out the natural tartness of the berries. All right, so we've got our zest in. Now we're going to put in a little bit of fresh ginger. Same thing, we're just going to grate it so it's not like super, super heavy. ginger there. We don't want it to be like overpoweringly gingery. And we're gonna hit it with a little bit of cinnamon. And we're gonna give it a sprinkling of sugar. I personally don't like my berries like super sweet. This is gonna have whipped cream on top, and the whipped cream is also gonna be sweet. So I kind of like to let some of the tartness stay within the berries. So we're just gonna kind of mix the cinnamon and ginger and oranges, or orange zest and everything around. And we're gonna add just a tiny bit of cornstarch. The reason we're adding some cornstarch is that when the berries start to cook, they're gonna release some juice. And the cornstarch, as the juice releases, is gonna thicken it up and make them kind of syrupy. Instead of, it gives it like that pie texture instead of it being like super liquidy. So we're just gonna make sure those are all nice and covered. We're gonna set those to the side for now, and then we're gonna start on our topping. All right, so we're gonna start making our topping for our cobbler. In this bowl, I have just all-purpose flour. If you were going to make this a gluten-free version, you would go ahead and substitute a finely ground almond flour. There are usually like coarser and finer grinds for almond meal. The reason that you want to use a finer grind is just for the rise and the softness, the texture of the dough. The coarse grind kind of comes out a little bit denser in my experience. So we're gonna start with our flour here. We're gonna add some baking powder, a little pinch of salt, add some more of our sugar. If you have brown sugar, you can use that. I just happen to have turbinado sugar on hand. You don't have to be all fancy and use this. You can definitely use just regular brown sugar, or granulated sugar works fine as well. And then we're gonna add some more cinnamon. And then I just like to kind of mix it around so it's like evenly incorporated. I like the cinnamon to be tossed into the flour a little bit. And then we're gonna add cold butter. Now, the trick is this butter must be cold. If it is room temperature, it is gonna mess you up. The reason is that when you make this type of a dough, if the butter is too warm, it kind of tends to completely mix into the flour. Whereas if it's cold when you start, and you start in little chunks like this, and you kind of just break it in slowly, you will have the butter melting as the flour starts to cook, and it creates like that flaky layer. So when you're making things like croissants or anything that has danishes, things that have those flaky textures like that, there's a lot of this where you're not really fully incorporating the butter. You actually want like pieces of the butter to be visible. So in this case, we're just gonna slowly break the butter in with our hands. It's a little bit of a process. You just kind of knead it in. I just kind of will grab little chunks and start breaking them into smaller chunks, kind of massaging it into the flour. And it's a little process. Get your workout, get your hand workout. Okay, so you see it starting to flake out a little bit. And you want to do this fairly quickly because again, you don't want the butter to melt too much. It's okay if it softens a little bit, but you don't want it to melt and be like completely combined with the flour. Okay. Okay. So you can see it starting to work in. That's exactly what we want. We want it to start to like make the flour. Okay, so if you see our dough now, you can see it kind of looks like a coarse, like lumpy sort of a meal. That's exactly what we want. There's still some butter chunks in here, but some of it started to incorporate just a little bit. So that's perfect. So what we're gonna do next, we're gonna take our cast iron skillet and we are gonna sprinkle our berries and all that sugar and ginger and orange and everything in the bottom of our pan. I'm just making a real small portion here because there's only 2 of us in the house and I don't want to waste a bunch of dessert, and I'm trying not to eat crazy amounts of sweets. So we're going to spread those around the pan. I also, if you want a variation on this, really like this with apples. So you can mix apples in and keep it just the same. Throw in some apples or raspberries and blueberries if you want to do like a mixed berry. And we're going to just sprinkle this topping right over. Okay. So like I said, everybody does different variations depending on the region. Some people call this a crisp instead of a cobbler. Where I'm from, this is what we call a cobbler. All right. You can leave it so that some of the berries show on the side a little bit. That's good. All right, so our cobbler is ready to go. So we're gonna go ahead and pop it in the oven at 350 degrees. This is gonna take probably 20 to 25 minutes to cook all the way. So we're gonna go ahead and get that started now. And with a bit of movie magic, we'll be back in about 20-25 minutes to check it out. Okay, so our cobbler is, I think, ready. We're gonna take it out and have a look. This smells amazing, and I can hear the berries sizzling in the pan there. So if you're using a cast iron like me, be careful because it does get very hot. All right, so this is just what we're looking for. So as you can see, our butter has melted. Our cobbler topping has got nice and crunchy and golden brown. The berries are kind of oozing up from the inside there, all their juices and everything. So I'm gonna call this done. I'm gonna go ahead and shut our oven off. And we're gonna let this cool just a little bit. Not really cold because we wanna eat it warm. We're gonna let it cool just slightly. And while we let it cool, we're gonna make some homemade whipped cream to go on top. Okay, so for the topping for our cobbler, we're gonna make some homemade whipped cream. So I have some heavy whipping cream. It's chilled. You want to make sure you're taking it like right out of the fridge because colder cream is going to whip easier. And we're going to add just a tiny bit of powdered sugar. It's not going to be a lot because the cobbler is already sweet. The topping on the cobbler, like the crust and everything, is sweet. So we don't really need this to be super, super sweet. So we're just going to add a little bit of powdered sugar in. I'm just kind of breaking it up so there's no chunks. For whatever reason, this particular powdered sugar has some chunky bits in it. Okay, so that's about all we're gonna add. And then I'm gonna give this a little tiny splash of cinnamon. Okay, so for our cream, we've got our cinnamon, our sugar, and our heavy cream. And we're just gonna give this a rapid stir. Of course, if you have a mixer or a handheld mixer, a stand mixer, whichever, you can definitely do this in there. Since I'm just doing a small quantity, I think it's easy enough to just do by hand. And actually add a little bit more cream in here. It doesn't take a super long time to beat it by hand, but you know, it's definitely a little more time efficient if you have a handheld mixer. I don't have a handheld mixer. I have a stand mixer over in the corner, but I don't really like to use it for just a small amount like this. It just takes a couple seconds. So when I used to whip things, I would get super, super tired. My arm would be burning. And then one time I watched a Julia Child video where she explained that whipping is all in the wrist. So you're really just using your wrist instead of moving your whole arm. And it allows you to whip a lot faster without burning all your muscles out. As you can see, our cream is already starting to hold some shape. We're not going to whip this super, super stiff. We just want it to, you know, kind of hold its shape a little bit. It's going to melt into the cobbler anyways. And then I'm going to add a special splash of brandy. There is one part of the recipe where Kaya talks about having Blackberry Cobbler. It's the second time where they serve it with a hard cream. In this case, I'm going to add a little splash of brandy. If you're trying to make this kid-friendly, obviously don't add that splash of brandy. But if it's just adults partaking, give it a little bit of a kick. So we're going to just go ahead and whip that brandy in real quick. And I didn't put a lot in here, just, you know, enough to give it a little hint of that brandy taste. All right. And there is our whipped cream. All right, so we have our finished plate here, our cobbler, our whipped cream. I'm gonna go ahead and try a bite real quick. You get some of that cream, make sure you get some berries and some of the topping. Give me a minute. This is perfection. For me, this is a plate of pure comfort. You have the nice sharp tanginess of the blackberries. You've got that zest of the orange in there, the fresh ginger, some cinnamon. Oh, it's perfect. And then the buttery sweetness of the crust on top is just the right crunchiness. It's not too gloopy, like you still kind of have the natural texture of the berries, but just enough to kind of hold the juice together so it doesn't get soggy on the bottom. And then that little splash of brandy and the whipped cream. Oh my goodness. This is it, guys. So this was my recipe, again, based on Where the Crawdads Sing. If you haven't read that book already, I highly, highly recommend reading it. It's so, so good. It was probably one of my best reads in the last half of the year so far. I would definitely recommend maybe making yourself this cobbler to have when you're finished with it, just because it is, you know, got some difficult subject matter, so you need a little something sweet to kind of warm your soul up afterwards is a good idea. And if you are looking for a dish to do for Thanksgiving, this is it. This is like the perfect dessert. While you're worried about making all those big complicated dishes for your meal, this is like a super simple dessert. Take you like 10 minutes, pop it in the oven, forget about it for half an hour, and it's gonna taste out of this world. If you don't already, please consider giving me a subscribe and hitting the notification bell. I post regular recipe content every single week. It's always based on a fictional book. So what I do is, this is mostly a book channel and I read a lot. And as I read, I annotate the books for any mention of food items or food dishes. And then I create recipes based on those food items and dishes. And I come here on Tuesdays and create these recipes like this for you guys. So if you like food recipes, definitely I'm here every single Tuesday. I post very religiously. And on Thursdays, I post strictly book content about what I'm reading, book hauls, book shopping, book organization, festive holiday book related content, all sorts of stuff like that. I have not missed a single post since I started this channel. So definitely consider, giving me that subscribe. If you like this particular video, hit the thumbs up. It really helps me know with feedback, how I'm doing, what people are liking, not liking, etc. And if you have some time, leave me a comment, even if it's just to stop by and say hello, introduce yourself. I have had on the last couple of videos people popping in just to say hi and, hey, I'm new, nice to meet you. And that to me makes my day. I love seeing just any kind of feedback at all. And of course, like always, if you have questions, if there's anything that was unclear in the recipe, please let me know in the comments as well. I do check the comments, I do answer questions. I'm happy to help you with anything. Even if it's not related to this recipe, you just have a food related question in general, I'm happy to answer. And also let me know if you plan to make this or you think you might make this like for Thanksgiving or Christmas, anything like that. I'd love to hear what your plans are if you plan to use this recipe. So I think that's everything. I'm Bandy. This is Bandy's Books. Thank you so much for stopping by.